Hello, Dr. Ron England here again today, and we're going to go over another one of the nice simple programming concepts that we've got to deal with all the time in programming, and that is looping. And as the word kind of implies right there, looping is just looping. It's doing something over and over again for a set period of times. But before we get into looping, we got to kind of explore some things so that you can understand how we're going to use it in programming. The basic concept of loops is pretty simple. You do something over and over again until you stop. That's it. That's looping. You got it. Okay, that's it. Now, let's first look at this concept. Now, in Python versus other languages, it's used a little bit differently, but in Python, you got to understand what a range is to understand how it can be used in one type of loop. Now, I could always start with while loops. We're going to start with for loops. So first thing I'm going to do over here is I'm going to highlight this little piece of code. And what I wrote here is j equals range 1, 10, and I'm going to print j. So I'm going to go boom, it's going to execute, and then over here, we're going to drop down over to here. I'll bring it over here so you can see it. This is what it actually outputs. For the j equals range 1 to 10, and when it outputs it, it outputs range 1 through 10. I mean, well, we just kind of set that. You know, we said it was range 1 through 10. So we got to kind of think about how am I going to use this range function? What does it do? Well, you know, the easiest way I think to take that and look at it is probably convert it to a list. Well, you know what happens? The list function will take a range and it will convert it to a list. So let's first do that and see what happens when we convert the range to a list. And a list, just think of a list as an array. Boom. Now we got something a little bit different here. The output of what the list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, it's the numbers in the range excluding the last number, which is the 10. Okay, so that should make you think, okay, well, if I have a range and I convert it to a list, it contains all the numbers 1 through 9 without the 10. So whenever I create a range, that's what it kind of like is doing there. That's what would be inside of a range. But the range function is kind of like, oh, it's an iterable function. Well, not an irritable function. Irritable functions would shout back at you. An iterable function will let you go through it and each value you can use. So stay away from irritable functions. Stay good with iterative functions. Well, let's just do that. Let's iterate through the function. So now I'm going to take this next piece of code for I in range 1 through 10. Okay, well, I've already said that range 1 through 10 is an iterable function. So you can iterate through it. And I is actually the iterator. That's another great word, iterator. And you got iterable functions and iterators. Well, what that really means is when you say for I in range 1 through 10, I want I to go through every iteration of that function. And what am I going to do in that case? Well, I'm going to just print it. So let's do that. Boom. All right, so now let's go back over to here and look at what the code did. Well, it printed out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It printed out the 1 through 9 that you saw when I converted it to a list. But in this case, it just printed out the values. So what happened there is the I iterated through the values in the range function, and it printed that I value was the value of each of the iterable elements of the range function, and it printed them all out. Now, that's a lot of big words. The reality is like, okay, I made this basically thing that I can go through, and it contains the numbers 1 through 9, and as it goes through each of the numbers 1 through 9, I just printed them. I just went boop, okay, next one, boop, next one, boop, next one, and each time you had next one, it was a number that was higher because that's the way I defined it. All right, well, we're good. That's working pretty well. Let's look at something else here because I'm going to come back to that range function. But let's try looking at something else here. What about if you just want to do something until you don't want to do it anymore? That's what a while is. I want to do it until something happens that tells me that I don't want to do it. Well, this is computer programming. You got to be pretty explicit to say, hey, I want to stop doing it. So let's do this. Let's set, in this case, I'm going to take I, I'm going to set it equal to 1. That's an integer. And then I'm going to say, well, I is less than 10. So in other words, as long as I is less than 10, I want to do this. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to print I. You can do anything. Okay, now, I isn't automatically going to increment like it does in the iterable function. Hey, it's going to have to be incremented manually. So I throw in I equals I plus 1 right down here inside of my while loop. So this is now my loop. All right, let's take that chunk of code and let's execute it. Well, look at this. What do you know? Kind of did exactly the same thing that iterable function did. I was equal to 1. Hey, and then while I is less than 10 said, hey, I is 1. It's less than 10. Let's do whatever's inside of my loop. Print I and then increment it. And it's going to go back to that while again and go, hey, I is still less than 10. Let's go ahead and go and do the next one, which of course was printing it. And it just kept doing it until, well, it got to 10. When it got to 10, the while said, well, 10 is less than 10. Wait, 10 is not less than 10. 10 is equal to 10. Okay, I'm not doing what's inside of my loop anymore. I'm done with it. That's the while. And that's really it. That's what it does. It's not any more rocket science than that. Now, they both do the same thing. They both have appropriate uses. Sometimes you want to have, a set number of iterations that you can go through to do stuff. Sometimes you don't. So let's go back over to here. Now I'm going to just change this function. For I in range 1, 10, 2. All right, well, the range function, in the last time, it took 2 arguments. Now it's taken 3 arguments. Anybody want to guess what that third argument does? I think you can probably figure it out if you think about it. But what it's going to do is it's just going to step through the range only. And this time it's going to step through 2 at a time. So you start with 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. In other words, that last argument was the step. So you got the step. Well, that's pretty cool. So we kind of got this going on here. Well, what else can we do with this? Well, we've got a lot of things that we can do with it. I mean, all you got to do. But, there are some things. This list, by the way, that's right up here, that's the array of values. It still exists. So I could actually watch this. That list still exists. Let's go L of I. Whoa, what's going to happen there? Well, it's not going to be anything very magical when you do it, because if I highlight that, the list index is out of range. Well, the reason for that is I go up through 10. Well, you know what? That list wasn't that big, so I can redefine that list to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to go through 11. It's going to print it out again. Now I'm going to set the list equal to that. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to loop through it. And there you go. The values are, okay, well, you know what might work a little bit better to help show you what it's doing? Because you're saying, well, L of I. Okay, L is a list. I is an iterator. Let's print the iterator. And let's print them both. Let's see what happens there. Print them both. Now you can kind of see it. Okay, the iterator is 1, but L of I is 2. Okay, and the iterator is 3. The L of I is 4. Okay, well, how do I know what it's doing? You're kind of thinking, I got to play with this a little bit more. But you know what? It's not that hard. If I say print L of 1, I'd kind of expect it to print out a 2. And guess what? That's exactly what it does. The iterator was 1. L of 1 is 2. So if I were to go say, well, what is it of 7? It should match what I had before, but L of 7 says that the value of L of 7 is 8. So if the number was 7, and if you did that with the iterator, you're going to get the same thing. In other words, those values here match those values down here. So you got these arrays, You've got a range function. You've got the ability to iterate through the range function with the for in. You've got a while, which basically says do this as long as this condition exists. And then you got ways to combine them in different ways. Well, you throw together what we already know how to do. We already know how to mess with arrays a little bit. We already know how to do conditionals. We know how to set up equations. We can define functions. And now we've got this ability to loop through things with either a condition or a set of values that you're going to iterate through. Well, is that powerful? Well, it's about 95% of all programming that's all going on behind the scenes anyway. So guess what? Yeah, it's kind of powerful. So can you solve problems with it? Well, this is programming for engineers. You better bet you can solve problems with it. Some amazing types of difficult problems with all those little pieces. So essentially now I've given you some atoms, and you're going to be able to start building some molecules. And molecules are some pretty powerful things. So if you got questions on this, well, you know, I don't know how to simplify this much more than what we got, but I can try. But this is what it is. Good programming. You got loops now. So we got another little bitty tool to throw into that programming toolbox to make things happen. So on out, good programming.